Hello, everyone. I'm back with another interview after a break that I hope you'll agree was much too long. I got the opportunity to interview a Coffeyville native, Richy Yates. So, Richy is a master technician at Twin Cities Ferrari in Minnesota. I haven't confirmed this, but I believe that he is one of the youngest, if not the youngest, Ferrari Master Technician in the country. Richy, in my opinion, was quite insightful about his journey and in the advice he gave to others in finding their passion and making their dreams come true, kind of like he's done with his. We spoke before and after the cameras started rolling, and one thing I think that I heard him say repeatedly along these lines was pick a path and figure out how to get there. With all of his accomplishments from go-kart racing to now a master technician, it's exciting to think about the fact that he has much more success coming his way in the future, and that he is from this little old town, Coffeyville. As for me, this podcast keeps doing better and better. I seem to get more interactions with every post. Though even with all the fun I've been having, a Ferrari still isn't in the budget. So for now, I'll go ahead and just stick with my poor man's Porsche. All right, I'm ready if you're ready.
I'm ready.
All right, cool. I'm Tanner Glenn. I'm here with Richy Yates. So Richy's a technician for, I don't know, tell us a little bit what you do, Richy. I don't want to take your limelight away from you.
Yeah, no, no. Yeah, I'm a Ferrari technician. I've been with Ferrari almost 5 years now. I started in 2019, just before COVID, August of 2019. So before that, well, actually, kind of start from the beginning. I grew up racing go-karts, obviously. That was kind of from a childhood, early childhood. I was into Formula One and IndyCar racing, and my parents, not nobody watched Formula One back then. Now you see it on ESPN and Netflix and everything, but no one knew what F1 was, and people barely knew anything outside of the Indy 500 for open wheel racing here. So it was definitely a unique interest from a young age. So my parents got into looking how those guys got their starts, and they found go-kart racing, like the serious type of go-kart racing that those guys do, and I just had a big interest in it, and they thankfully were able to give me that opportunity. So we started go-kart racing. I traveled around doing that for a while, and really that's kind of where the car and automotive thing started for me. And get to high school, I was tinkering with my own stuff, and when you're growing up, you probably think you know what you want to do, especially in high school. You might change your mind a few times, and then over time, it definitely was, from a really young age, I want to work for Ferrari, like from the time of watching them on TV, right? And then, as you get older, you start thinking, okay, well, how does that actually work? What avenues can I take to get there? Like realistically, what does working for Ferrari or any of the big names or brands in racing or cars mean? So, then, the most realistic path, given what I'm interested in, was being a technician, right? So, then I went to Arizona, went to Universal Technical Institute. It was a year-long program, and while I was there, still part of the reason I went there is they had the Mercedes, Porsche, and BMW factory programs, right? So after you complete your year-long curriculum, you can get accepted into one of those three. There's other programs too, but those are the three that interested me. I originally thought I was going to go to Porsche, kind of stay in the motorsports background, but Mercedes reached out to me, and I liked what they had to say. So, I started going through that process, and I got accepted into the Mercedes program after I graduated. So that was in Phoenix. Moved out to Jacksonville. I did 3 or 4 months there at a Mercedes training center, at their regional hub down in Jacksonville, and then I got placed in the dealer. I decided I want to go back to Kansas City, be close to home. That opened the door for me. My dealer in Kansas City, they had a Maserati franchise, which Maserati in the early to mid 2000s was owned by Ferrari. So there's a lot of, technical carryover, right? They use a lot of same drivetrain, like there for a while. Maserati was using Ferrari engines and Ferrari electronics, right? So it's basically kind of a repackaged Ferrari, little less aggressive, right? These were more like a GT car versus like a supercar, right? But the framework was there. So I was able to pick up Maserati, and then really I spent 2.5 years or so there, and I was happy to be working on Maseratis, right? There's no Ferrari in Kansas City, or really, especially back then, anywhere close to home. I think the closest one was Dallas and then Denver. I think I was 23. I don't remember where I saw it, but I saw a list posting for Ferrari technician at Ferrari Maserati in Scottsdale, Arizona. I was familiar with the location. I lived in Arizona before. It was a Penske-owned store. I grew up familiar with the Penske name from watching IndyCar racing my whole life. So I kind of threw out a Hail Mary. Well, I got Maserati on my resume. I don't have any Ferrari, but they're a Ferrari Maserati franchise. I could at least get my name, foot in the door, and see where I need to be in 5 years. Kind of early on when I decided, maybe working for Ferrari or something was actually somewhat realistic. I kind of was like, well, I'd like to go when I turn 25. Like that was kind of a goal. But I said, I'll apply now. And I didn't know what to expect, but they I went out there for an interview, and they were happy and offered me a job. So I was scared and excited or whatever, but accepted and moved out there. Did Ferrari Maserati from like 2019, so to end of 20. I'm losing track of the years now, but it would have been 22, I think. Yeah, 22, August of 22. Then I moved. I interviewed for the store in Minneapolis, which was a newer store. Ferrari expanded in the Midwest. They had a location in St. Louis and now Minnesota. And yeah, my girlfriend Dana, I met while I was in Arizona. She was from Minnesota. So I had spent time up here visiting her here in the Twin Cities, and I loved it so much. It was closer to home. I told her, I was like, if they ever had a Ferrari dealer, I'd consider moving up there. And, they opened one up, and I gave it a year or so to kind of let them get their feet under themselves. I wasn't quite ready when they opened, I think in 21, to move. I wanted more experience, right? So, to be able to make a leap into a smaller store, where there's probably a little more responsibility, on a tech, you go from a store with like 9 guys to this. So, and same thing, they were happy and it all worked out. And yeah, so I've been with them since 22, I think it is. So yeah, I'll be coming up on 2 years here in August. So almost 5 years total with Ferrari.
So where did the passion start for working and diagnosing problems on stuff? Was it when go-karts? Did you and your family kind of work on?
Yeah, it was definitely go-karts. Like, I didn't really come, a lot of technicians or whatever, mechanics, they come from an automotive family, right? I grew up on a farm, right? You always solve problems and stuff on a farm. My dad was always doing something, but we weren't necessarily gearheads. My dad, like there's a lot of people, right? Just interested in cars, find the technology fascinating, right? But we weren't really an automotive family really until we started watching F1 and IndyCar, right? And then it was headfirst in from, no real wrenching experience to doing go-karts, and, then you're starting from scratch, right? And yeah, a lot of people, thankfully, helped us along the way. You meet some awesome people. Like that's been the best part about growing up go-kart racing, is all the helpful, awesome people and friendships, that you make. But that's where, yeah, it definitely came from, right? Watching F1, seeing all the technology, seeing the mechanics working in the garage, trying to get the car, something happens, right? They're trying to get it back on track or something. And then too, like, doing it ourselves. And there's always some problem that happens at the track, right? It's just, you and me and my dad, and my mom and my sister and stuff were there too. But really primarily all the working on stuff was me and my dad. You have friends and stuff too. Their dads come and help, but you got an hour, or you got 30 minutes until the next practice, the engine's not firing. And I mean, you don't even have time to diagnose it, right? Let alone fix it. So it's hectic. Or two, like you go out, excuse me, you go out and say like weather's changed and now your setup that you spent all weekend is it's doing nothing for you now. The cart, it's not handling right. So you come in, you got 30 minutes after until qualifying, and you're like, oh, it's drive like crap. So what you're trying to rush to, change an axle or do an alignment or any of these, things you can do to change setup. You only got 30 minutes or your weekend's over. You're not going to qualify where you want. Or, you bring to between the race weekends. Another awesome part was like bringing, you race all weekend, it's racing rough and, the cart's, dirty, and you need to go through it and prep it for the next race weekend, right? So you bring it home, and after school, you and dad go out in the garage and, you tear it all down and clean everything and check everything, you mount tires and everything and be ready for the next race and do it all over. So that's definitely where it started. It was all go-kart racing for sure. And then that carried over into, working on my own car. It's when you get the first real taste of it, you know what I mean? And whether you find out pretty quick whether or not you even like doing it or not. I mean, some people love cars, right, but hate working on them. So, I mean, you grow to like it more over time, I think. And, for me, it was something I enjoyed doing. So
For sure. I fall in that category where I love them and I only like to work on them so much. There's a certain point where I'm just like, oh,
yeah,
God.
right.
But
Yeah. Well, too, it comes full circle, right? Like I love to work on cars. Like that's my passion, right? Well, really working on Ferraris, fixing, diagnosing Ferraris. Now that I work on cars all day, the last thing I ever want to do is touch my own car. I don't want to do anything to my car. I'm so done working on cars by the time of the weekend or night. Now, if I had like a neat project I could, do at home, that's a different story. But, doing maintenance on my Volkswagen, or, it's not it's the last thing you want to spend your Saturday doing.
for sure, yeah. So, but I got a two-part question for you. Made me think of it. So, doing everything on the
Yeah.
go-karts, having to be quick on fixing the problems, making it right for the next race. Did you ever, number one, did you ever think about working for a race team? And then number two, you said you made lots of friends on go-karts. Do you still talk to any of those people? Are they out in the industry?
Yeah, firstly, of course, when I was growing up, earliest thing is I only wanted to work for a race team, right? Like that's the only thing I wanted to do. All I wanted to do is race. And if I couldn't race, I wanted to work for a race team, right? So, quickly into the industry, there's a rude awakening as you're going to school and stuff. It's like, hey, guys, race car mechanics typically don't make any money. You travel a lot. It's not the most stable job market in most cases, right? There's only a couple places in the country you can live. You can either live like in Charlotte, North Carolina, if you're doing NASCAR, or if you're doing IndyCar, you're basically living in Indianapolis. Now, there's obviously like other forms of racing in the United States, road racing, sports cars, and they've got regional hubs, right? There's definitely lots of teams out west in California and stuff, Florida and stuff, but two, it's a little harder to get into if you don't have like a path in mind or whatever, and two, like I said, the money's not great. The career isn't super stable unless maybe you're a race engineer or something, but I didn't go to engineering school. So quickly I was like, I don't need to work on race cars, right? Especially if I can do something like work on Ferraris, or two, even when I started Mercedes, right? Like, oh, this is awesome. Like Mercedes is one of the biggest, if not the biggest innovator in the car world, in terms of technology. So yeah, and I'll circle back around to this later, on the race working for race team thing. But two, friends and go karting. Yeah, one of my best friends I ever had, his name's Wyatt. He's from Tulsa. We grew up racing together, and he's one of my best friends to this day. Yeah, it's funny enough, I know some kids from Minnesota that I raced with that have popped into the store and said hi and different stuff like that. Yeah. But the other thing is, I was the only one near home that raced. So, everyone else lived far apart. So only so many friends and stuff that But my friend Wyatt, yeah, he absolutely one of my best friends to this day. We traveled all over together.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the race team thing, I ended up closest thing I guess I did when I was in Arizona. I would do some freelance work for like track stuff. Like I had a awesome couple that I was friends with that had a R35, a GTR, and it was on slick tires, road racing car, slick tires, uh, rear wing, roll cage, bucket seats, harnesses, and everything. And they were driver instructors. So like they would race on the race weekends. They sometimes would also take time they would instruct when they're not in their car. They'd go do driving instructor for other drivers wanting to earn their racing license. Well, the guy's name was Wes. He was the husband. He's like, well, I can't really do all the maintenance and stuff while driving and coaching. My wife's coaching too. So they hired me I basically would go do race weekends with them around Arizona and California. And so they would hop out of the car, we'd have our set procedures, I'm doing tires, alignments in pit lane, doing setup adjustments, minor stuff, right? Doing fueling and different stuff, but it makes the world of difference when you have someone dedicated to doing that. Another person I helped out every once in a while, a couple times, Tracy, former IndyCar driver. He lived in Scottsdale. He had a Lamborghini Super Trofeo track car. It's not road legal. It's a race car, but yeah, he had one of those in town. And I don't remember how we, got hooked up, but yeah, I'd go over to his house and we'd prep it for the night before he loads it up and takes it to the track, service it. Yeah, it's a, full-fledged race car. Yeah. So, and then there was another shop I would try and do stuff for. I'd leave Ferrari and go work over there until 8 or 9 o'clock for just, all sorts of different stuff, mostly Ford stuff, actually, Ford turbo stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's the closest I've ever got to doing like race stuff. Like there's options for Ferrari, like they have Ferrari challenge teams, but I'm happy at the dealership. Really, we see challenge cars, we see Ferrari race cars at work every so often, actually.
Yeah. 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 Like you said, you're happy with what you're doing and you do some cool stuff. And we were kind of talking about that before we had the camera going. So we're talking about the Miami Vice Ferraris, the
Yeah, yeah.
Daytona, and then what do you say the white one was?
The white one was a Testarossa, yeah.
Testarossa. Okay, yeah. But yeah, if you want to tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now. So
Yeah.
we'll kind
Well,
of
going back to the Testarossa, the first Ferrari I ever, pulled an engine and did any like legitimate engine service work like on a bench was on a Testarossa. That was my first dive into like vintage Ferrari stuff. That was in Scottsdale. Yeah, but right now, yeah, we don't always only service Ferraris. Like even though we're a Ferrari dealership, every once in a while we do some off-brand stuff. We have our internal vehicles that will be like in our used car inventory. We offer, not just Ferraris for used car inventory. So if we get like, every once in a while we'll service McLarens, other high-end, Audi R8s, some Lamborghinis, things like that. I got a coworker, his name is Ricardo. He's doing a Lamborghini Diablo. Basically, he's going through the gearbox. He has it all gutted on the bench right now. Engine's on the bench. He's going to finish the engine service. Coworker Tim, he's pulling a engine on a 365 GT4 Daytona, which is the other Miami Vice car. I think they had a Daytona Spider, slightly different, but that's, I think, the other Miami Vice Ferrari. So when we got those, I'm doing in terms of off-brand stuff, I'm doing a 74, I think, De Tomaso Pantera, which is like we talked about earlier, mid-engine Italian body, and it's got a Ford 351 Cleveland V8 pushrod engine in there. So when we see everything, right, and like I said earlier, Ferrari is one of the only brands that you can take your vintage vehicle to, and you'll see you can get full service. We'll pull the engine out on the bench and go through anything. Like our show floor, we have cars from the 70s all the way up to, we've got a race car on the floor, Ferrari 48 Challenge car. We've got the newer stuff I was telling you earlier. We've got the hybrid stuff now. So yeah, like our our top production vehicle right now is a 1,000 horsepower twin turbo V8 hybrid car. It's got electric motors on the front and rear axle. So in terms of the progression of technology, dating back to carbureted stuff all the way up to, you know, the complete evolution of basically where, you know, road cars that are this with racing technology on the road. Basically, that's what Ferrari has been doing forever for the most part. Even today, like our high voltage stuff, all it some way or another trickles down from F1. So
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So no, that's pretty cool stuff. Like you're saying, the basically the hybrid Ferrari is pretty awesome. So 1,000 horsepower, that's a lot.
yeah,
Not very many people off the street could handle something like that.
yeah. I mean, it's crazy too to think of, like, I don't know, 2003 or whatever seems like not very long ago, but that's over 20 years ago. But, you know, 2003, I mean, you had some pretty serious sports cars, supercars, right? But like you go buy a mid-engine V8 Ferrari back in 2003, you're buying a Ferrari 360 it's probably making 400 horsepower, right? Now you buy a mid-engine Ferrari V8 engine Ferrari, it's 1,000 horsepower. Like the amount of power that you can get in a road car now is just crazy. And I understand they're supercars and stuff, but I mean, you go over to Audi or whatever, or Mercedes Audi, and you buy one of their performance sedans, you can get 500-600 horsepower in a sedan, if not more.
Yeah, yeah, that's the other thing you're talking about. Like you've got the Porsche Sport Utility and all that stuff like that. I mean, that's a pretty sweet car, and I mean it's a sport
Yeah, yeah,
utility.
yeah.
So
Everything is like a sports. Yeah.
yeah. And so you said Ferrari and Porsche are the only two brands that work on pretty much everything they've manufactured. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, for the most part. Obviously, probably certain stores are, you know, there's exceptions, right? Like, you know, probably more some Mercedes, like in Kansas City, like they took in like some vintage, you know, older Mercedes stuff every once in a while, and they'd have a guy that one of the techs, so he was kind of like you know, he's experienced. He's kind of the older car guy, and you know, probably some of the other Euro makes too here and every event now and again. But you know, I'd say in terms of like consistency, like consistently seeing stuff like that, like Ferrari and then Porsche would be the two from my understanding, that see the
Right.
most like vintage stuff, right? Like, you know, I don't really think, you know, I could be wrong, but I don't really think like someone's taken their 69 Chevy truck to the GM dealership, you know, to
Mhm.
get in certain cases, sure, but for the most part, yeah.
Yeah, not definitely not as common for sure. I agree with you. So let's I don't know, let's think about something. What I don't know, I should have prepped some questions probably. I always go off the cuff on these, but what's
That was,
something that's real memorable? You know, something you've worked on, something you've seen technology, what's something that really just stands out to you?
I mean, for sure, the Testarossa is one for me because such like an iconic car. You know, they're a modern classic, the Miami Vice car. You know, they're just in Ferrari in general. It's an iconic car. It's one of the cars of the '80s. So being able to do the Testarossa major service still is one of my favorites. Two, other movie cars. I don't know how we haven't brought it up, but I work on quite a bit of like 308s and 328s, which is the Magnum PI car. I've got two I'm working on right now. I'm finishing a major engine service. Just three seals, timing belts, valve adjustment, stuff like that. Had a running condition, and then on other one, I'm doing a complete suspension overhaul. You know, all four corners. So, you know, that's cool to be able to work on those cars. Most of my most memorable stuff has to come from any of the vintage stuff, just because those cars, you know, it's kind of a dying art, I guess. Like a lot of the people that do that stuff are retiring, and you know, a lot of people don't want to work on them, and you know, there's more of an art and there's a little more intimate servicing that stuff. Like, you know, the Ferrari is not the best in the world in terms of like, you know, having every little step laid out for you in general. Like they kind of assume, you know, you kind of have a pretty firm understanding on automotive and diagnosis and things like that, right? So even the older stuff, the farther you go back, there's even less service information on, right? So being able to do that kind of stuff and learn, you know, some the old stuff is fun for me. I mean, we did another memorable one. Me and my coworker Ricardo, we did a 512 BB engine out major service. That was I think a 76, but yeah, mid-engine flat 12 carbureted Ferrari. Pretty freaking cool. You got 12 carburetors, or I think it's got 6 2-barrel carbs. It's either 6 2-barrel carbs or 4 3-barrel carbs, but literally right behind your head. I mean, there's no better sound, right? Manual gearbox, no traction control, no power steering. I mean, it's pretty awesome. Like being able to, take that stuff out, go through it, make sure it's, perfect. And then you get to go drive it. Like that's like awesome moments, right? Like, I don't know the next time I'll have a 512 in my bay, just because, those are rare cars. I don't even know if they were sold in the United States. I don't think they were. They were all imported from Europe. So anytime I get a chance to do some of the old stuff, it's cool.
Yeah, because like you're saying, it takes away some of the mundane where I mean, still the new stuff is awesome, right? But you're
Yeah.
kind of like, all right, it's kind of a nice break where you get to work on something
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. And the new stuff, it can be nerve wracking, right? Doing like working on high voltage systems. Like all three of us had to get high voltage certified through Ferrari, which is, and we have to, anytime we work on the high voltage system on these cars, they got 500-volt batteries, right? We got to power down and, make the system basically safe to work on, right? So, like the systems now, the electrical systems are very complex. We've got twin turbocharged, V8 with variable valve timing and stuff. And all this stuff's been around, for a while in the industry, right? But when you have a car that essentially has a race engine for the track, now you throw in hybrid stuff, and it's all the new stuff definitely still is a challenge, especially in terms of like electrical diagnosis and things like that. But it's definitely the vintage stuff for me is my favorite.
Yeah. So what do you see next step for you, or what's the next step you think they're going to take innovative? So I'll do a two-part. What's next for you? What do you think's next for Ferrari? What do you think the next crazy thing
Well,
you're going to do?
Well, for me, I don't know, really. I just got my master certification with Ferrari, which is kind of what I've been working towards for the last, 5 years, right? Or longer than that, since I've been in the industry, whatever brand you're with, you want to be master certified, right? And so to be able to get to Ferrari and then finally get that was my biggest first check off my list. So really anything other than that is just kind of like, I guess, right now I would say just improving my skills. Right now I want to just kind of take things to the next level in terms of that, just gain more experience, and then I don't know, later down the road maybe look at something. But in terms of Ferrari, I mean, weirdly enough, we've got an SUV coming out. Ferrari calls it an FUV. It's not an SUV, it's a Ferrari utility vehicle, which is odd, but it's pretty serious. It's front engine V12. It's got, I don't know, it's 800 horsepower, I think. And it's got 48-volt high voltage suspension, right? And it's got a little high voltage battery just for doing the active dampening on the suspension and everything. So that'll be cool. Really whatever direction F1 goes with technology is going to kind of where that's Ferrari always incorporates some F1 technology. I mean, you can look back into the 80s or 90s and see that they've always found some way to incorporate F1 technology into their car. I know we're going to come out with LaFerrari replacement. LaFerrari is the last supercar we came out with, and I think they made 499 of them. Every once in a while Ferrari comes out with a supercar, they would call, right? So they've had 5 over company's history. So it's been out of, I think the last year they made that was like 2018. I could be totally wrong. So I know they're working on that. That'll be coming soon. I don't know anything really about it, but yeah, I would just say whatever F1 is doing, and really right now, nothing too innovative past hybrid stuff. They've been kind of hybrid technology, and increasing like the hybrid tech in F1 has kind of been the thing that's most recently hit our cars. So whatever comes next after that, I would say is going to be what I would expect to see.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. The FUV. I mean, that's because whenever I saw they've got the Porsche Sport Utility, Porsche Sport Utility, and the Lamborghini Sport
Yeah.
Utility. I mean,
Yep.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, I've driven some of the Uruses, the Lamborghini SUVs. They're essentially, well, they are literally they're Audis with like a V12. I think I don't even know if they got a V8 in them or a V12. I can't remember, but they're Audis with a different body, right?
yeah.
Uh, Driven the Ferrari Pure Sangue. They haven't came out yet, but Ferrari brought one by. They bring a new model every time Ferrari has a new model. They bring them by the store and they showcase them so they can take orders and all that. And I got to drive the Pure Sangue, which is our SUV. It's Pure Sangue means pure bred in Italian. You know, like a racehorse.
Mhm.
It's pretty legit. The suspension is probably the coolest thing because the car, no matter what, you know, because SUV is like top heavy, right? Center of gravity is not gonna be like a sports car. Well, the suspension in that thing keeps it level basically at all times, right? So it eliminates all that body roll, which it's pretty impressive. You know, when Ferrari decides they want to do something, you know, they may not be the first person to come out with whatever technology, right? They very much do things on their own terms, their own timeline. No one's going to force Ferrari really to follow any trend, right? So, you know, SUVs have been a trend for a while, and Ferrari finally decided they want to make one. You know, they always do it in their own way, which I respect. It's always something unique.
Yeah, so I guess I've got about looks like we got about a little over 4 minutes left. So probably the last few things I want to ask you is what advice do you have for somebody who, wants to be a technician, has a passion for cars, or even just a passion in general? What's your advice to them?
Well, I guess in cars specifically, like you have two options. You can either go to school or you can try and go straight into the field. You know, if you go straight into the field, you're probably looking at, you know, going on the lube line or something. I mean, I know guys, I've worked more than one guy. You know, anyone can be a tech, girl, guy, doesn't matter. But, you know, I've worked with people before, no school whatsoever, worked their way up, master technician, shop foreman, all this stuff, right? But if you're going to go to automotive school, I would say, you know, make sure, you know, that's your plan. I would say if I went back to Universal Technical Institute, I would only do it the way I just went through. Like you want to go get into one of the manufacturer training programs that they offer at the end with BMW, Porsche, Ferrari, any of the, Mercedes, right? That's what makes that worth it. And then two, you know, I guess really what I try and do and never stop studying. Like I'm always reading, always trying to learn, right? And always try and better myself. So you can never, I just say, take it a little more serious than you think you should. Probably. I wish I would have done that a little sooner, but
But obviously, you've done
yeah,
very
just
well.
try and be dedicated. Yeah, yeah, and there's always room for improvement. But you know, I guess in life, you know, in general, even if you don't want to be a technician, if you know there's something you want to do, obviously, I would just try and find a plan, right? Find a plan to go do something. Such like mine kind of fell into place kind of early, but then like as each thing happened, like I would kind of pick a next step, right? Like I was like, well, after Maserati, I want to go to Ferrari, and you know the path might be different each way, but if you can kind of craft, say if we're talking professionally, right? If you can craft your resume to like, you know, if you have something you want to work towards, like work towards just getting your resume ready to get to that next position. And that's kind of what I was able to do. Like I said, at first probably inadvertently, right? You know, but that's kind of what I would say. Always kind of put yourself in the position to be able to accept the job you want if it ever comes up.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I think it's great advice. And then before I ask you the last question, I want to tell you thanks very much for your time and
Yeah,
sharing part of your story. I hope we can do it again and talk some more about some stuff. So,
man. Yeah. No, I think the interviews you've been doing are great. Obviously, my mom's I thought was great too. So
huh?
I'm glad you're doing this, especially, you know, with people back home. Like it's good to see like local people from Southeast Kansas sharing their stories, whether they're entrepreneurs or, you know, just doing their own thing, you know, prominent people, you know, any person's story back home is cool to see.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a blast. Your mom was cool as could be. I mean, she was fun. So, and I had technical difficulties too, and she didn't even care. She's like, we'll just roll with it. And So yeah. So it looks like we're gonna end in about a minute. What's your most favorite car you've ever drove?
Favorite car I've ever drove. The 512 BB was my favorite car I ever drove. Like I said, carbureted, mid-engine V12, manual gearbox, no electronic assists. That's everything that a Ferrari to me is about. So
Yeah. A real driver's car.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, Richie. I really appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. All right.
Yeah.
See ya.
Take care, man.